Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to finish what we started last week, and that's a review of the Bose 901. All right, well, thanks for sticking around. So to kick it off, wanted to apologize for the delay in getting out the video. Life got in the way and didn't have an opportunity to get it out on time like I wanted to. So I'm a bit late, but wanted to pick it up and cover where I was going to take it from last week, from the first video. And so as a reminder, in the first video, I was comparing the Series 1 Bose 901 to the Series 3 and showing you the differences between the two. And then I took some time, I wanted to compare the 1 and the 3 head to head, or actually separately, and then get a feel for how they sounded, and then sort of pick a winner from that, and then compare that head to head with the Advent. Well, as you can see, what's sitting here set up, I decided and chose the original model, the Series 1. There were some subtle differences I just preferred. I think I felt like the original just had a little bit better bass for me, at least in my setup, compared to the 3, even though the 3 has some tweaks there to supposedly give it a better bottom end. I kind of just preferred the sound of the 1. And that was the biggest difference. I didn't feel like anything else was drastically different. But for me, that's where I went. So before I get into the sound and before I talk about the comparison, the Bose 901 is a very unique speaker. If you're not familiar with how they're configured, again, there's one driver up front. I think it's a 4.5 inch. I can't remember off the top of my head. Single driver, and then there are 8 drivers on the rear and at an angle, and they're pointed toward the wall, so they're rear firing. So that gives it the direct reflecting terminology. So most of the energy or music information is reflecting off the walls behind us. So I'll show you the diagram. What's in this diagram actually comes, I think, from the Series 3 manual, but it's a good depiction of what they're trying to do with the sound. And as I understand it, Omar Bose originally designed the speakers in trying to emulate the Boston orchestra hall and the acoustics of the hall itself. So he was trying to emulate that sort of around the entire hall sort of energy that you get, I guess, from listening to the orchestra, and that is all around you. So that's what he's attempting to do with the 901. So it's quite a unique speaker, nothing else like it. I think at some point in time early on anyway, there was at least a company that tried to duplicate them and copy their design. I think Bose sort of sued them out of existence, and rightfully so. They had their own patents and things, so you have a patent, so you don't have copycats like that. But someone was brave enough to do it. You might see some out there, and I think they look more similar. I don't think they looked more like the 3. They look more similar to the 1 and 2 in their cabinet design. So you might see something out there that looks similar, but isn't a Bose. So just be aware of that. Okay, so moving on, we'll go ahead and jump into a bit of the sound here. So I did my comparison, and so I spent the time this week going back and forth. I had each set moved a little bit further away, a little bit further out from the wall. The recommendation is anywhere from 12 inches to 24 inches, and I mostly stayed in between, right in the middle there, around 14 to 16 inches roughly, maybe up to 18, I think, at one point. So that's where I had them. I did not have these Advents in place here when I was doing my listening. I had them separate to give them plenty of room for bouncing their musical information off the wall and giving that as much reflection as possible. I did experiment a little bit going further out and a little bit in, but I didn't. I felt like if I got them too close to my cabinet here that might interfere. So they're not too close, but they are in this setup just far enough back that they're actually firing behind the Advent here. So when I was going to head, I didn't actually notice any difference in the sound and reflection of the Bose 901 set. I spent quite a bit of time. I had them hooked up, by the way, to my Sansui. It can handle a connection of 3 different sets of speakers, but I hooked up each set to this and then played music through my Marantz CD player. So that was my source and that was my power for this, head-to-head comparison. So at this point, I guess I'll jump into the actual comparison and my review and my ratings. So if you're not familiar with how I review speakers, I review them in 5 areas. That's style, and then it gets into the imaging and soundstage, and then the lows, the mids, and the highs, and each section gets 20 points as a high score for each section. So in a total, 100 points. So starting off with the style, Advent gets a 13. It's a little bit of a, even though this was called a bookshelf, by the way, back in the day, it's a little bit large and takes up a little bit of space. So it gets a 13 for this. This is actually, to me, the best looking Advent. We call this the bullnose. And so I like it, but it does take up a little bit of a footprint here. So it gets a 13. For the Bose, it's a bit of a smaller speaker, but it does still require some stands. But not this model. I'm sort of giving the points here for the Series 3. I think the Series 3 is a little bit better looking. I think it's a more stylish, more contemporary, if you will, cleaner lines. So even though it required some stands and need to be away from the wall, I think you have a better looking speaker overall, and just a little bit smaller form factor. Although it's a little bit wider, I think you might be able to set those stands in a little bit more accommodating position sometimes. But either way, I thought it was better looking, and that's really where I gave it the points. So I ended up giving it 15 points against the Advent out of 13. So moving on into the imaging and the soundstage, and this is where it's going to take. I had more going back and forth and A and B back and forth on this area than anywhere else. It's just quite different than any other speaker. Now, if you've not experienced a lot of speakers, then I think it might be a challenge for you to comprehend or understand what the differences are and what you can hear with different types of speakers. And the best speakers, in my opinion, that image the best are electrostats. And when you hear what they can do from a point source like an electrostat and the musicality of it and the imaging that they can produce and the soundstage they can produce, that's sort of your benchmark, and you are sort of comparing everything else to them. Well, in that regard, and of course in this comparison, I'm comparing it to the Advent, but the Advent score also reflects the fact that I'm aware of where the soundstage and the imaging can go. So the Advent gets a 13 in this area. Now for the Bose, its claim to fame is the fact that it's reflecting. It's supposed to give you this image and this feel of music throughout the room. Now, it's obvious that I don't have a wall to reflect off on either side very well, but in this case, I don't think it really mattered a whole lot. It may have given it a little bit more as far as some enveloping you in the music, perhaps, and giving you a sense of more of a hall effect. But overall, the issue, I'll just say issue I was having, is that the musical information is quite different than, I will say, any other speaker. Every other speaker I've experienced, the music information is in front of the speakers. And to me, it was just much more realistic. In the case of the Bose, quite understandably, most of the music information is going behind and reflecting off the wall, so the image is back here. It's behind the speakers, and it just didn't feel to me as realistic as I know it can be. And I was having a hard time with that. So the image was behind the speakers, and I didn't get a sense of great musical separation. It was a bit sort of kind of all together there. So that was a bit problematic. And it kind of, I'll say, felt muddled in a way. I didn't get that separation that I know is possible. So this was the area I spent most time on because I felt like this is their hallmark. This is really what they're supposed to be great at, and I just didn't get the sense of that. Now, I will say that well, I'll do this in my summary, but so for the ratings, I ended up giving it a score of 10, which I was quite surprised it was going to be that low. I was expecting something much more dynamic and would score much higher. I didn't think it would actually get any lower than the Advent, because the Advent's imaging is right in the middle for the most part. It's a fairly small sweet spot here in the middle, but it's very good. It's a very nice sweet spot, and you have musicality to it, and you have separation of instruments. It's all there, just in a smaller soundstage itself. So I just have to say I was shocked, really, that it was taking that expectation, and I was sort of fighting with my disappointment, to be honest. And so again, I tried them in multiple different positions, further away from the wall, closer to the wall, etc. And I just couldn't get away from the fact that I was still sort of getting the same experience. So, so a 10 on the imaging. Now, moving into the lows, I was a little surprised at what they could produce on the low end. To be honest with you, I didn't have a lot of expectation, but I'm sure because of the EQ, it gets a bit of boost. And again, don't forget, they're fairly small drivers, but I was a little surprised at what they were able to output and produce, and it wasn't horrible. I would say it's probably not quite as tight as the Advent, but still quite there. And so I ended up giving it a 14, which the Advent gets a 14, so ended up tying. But they do sound different. I won't say that they don't sound the same at all, but it was more than I expected initially going into it. Moving on to the mids, the Advent gets a 16 in the mids, even though it doesn't have a mid-range. It is a two-way. It has a tweeter and a woofer, but the blending of those two works out very well, and so it's got a nice mid-range. On the 901, it is their sweet spot, which seems to make sense given the type of drivers that it has. You would think that, that naturally that's where it's going to be best, and I think that's it. But when it comes to the mid-range, and everything ties also to the imaging, on the mid-range, my expectation is their voices for singers are going to be out in front of everything. And in this case, again, because it is actually behind, up against the wall, it just didn't seem right. It didn't have that sense of realism that I kind of expect. So although it was there, the mid-range was pleasant as far as tone. I did like that part of it. I still gave it a point less than the Advent at a 15. Moving on to the highs, there's it's kind of clear that the speakers are being pushed, I think, to their limits in a way. Now maybe the newer ones are better. I need to try that, but using the original here, I was kind of surprised at how high they were able to go. That was a bit of a surprise. I really expected quite much, mostly just high mid, but I got some highness out of it, but there was no crispness there. There was no, it was kind of clear that there's not a tweeter that can get up there. And I don't like, I'll say, bright speakers whatsoever. If you've seen my reviews of some JBLs and some Yamahas, they're just not for me. And if that's the type of speaker you like, by the way, you do not want to go near a 901 because they don't get there. But if you're looking for, some of that little crispness, the cymbals, and just, it doesn't need to be bright in any way, but a little crispness there, I just couldn't get it. And that might be partially due to the fact that, again, it's reflecting off the wall. So reflected sound, it's going to absorb some amount of sound energy. So it's got to, I would think, sort of take the edge off of it a bit. And that's, to me, it's quite noticeable. So for highs, I ended up giving it a 14, whereas the Advent has a 16. So overall, so in total, the 901 ended up with a 68 and the Advent has a 72. But as far as an overall summary, I liked them. I didn't dislike them. I didn't go, wow, I can't stand the speaker. I'm a collector. I like all vintage audio gear. So they have a legendary status in audio history. So I respect that, and I think that they do have a place. And if you are not at all someone who worries about oh, I have to have the best highs and the deepest lows, then I think it's a fine speaker. And it can be exciting, by the way. If you give it enough volume, it does the room does come alive. There is the energy does increase when you increase the volume, I'll say it that way. And they can be fun. There's nothing to say negatively about that. If you want to crank them up and really fill up the room with some sound, they can do that. But if you are wanting to have more critical listening, then I think that's where they get edged out. If you want to have a set of speakers that you think are very stylish and are great at some background music and the occasional turning it up, I think they'll work for that. But if you're looking to get all of the musical detail out of a recording and make sure you don't miss anything, then I think there are many other better options, out there. So that's where they fell. I hope it doesn't disappoint many. These are staying in my collection. I'm not selling these. Partially, I'll be honest with you, I have the boxes for these and I have everything, and they're the originals. And for me, many times as a collector, I kind of want the first one, the first model. To me, that's sort of important as a collector. So for that reason, and the fact again that these don't require surrounds. It doesn't have foam surrounds, so I don't have to worry about that. And so that's a factor for me. But anyway, that's where it ended up. Advent at a 72 and the Bose 901 at a 68. All right, so this week I have a little bit of a sidebar. I was perusing Facebook last week and I was on the marketplace. As such, I ran across this turntable, and a nice fellow named Jordan was selling it. He had acquired this along with quite a number of other pieces that he had sold. And so I went over. He only lived about 30 minutes away, so I headed over there and saw the table. It has some issues that I need to address before it's fully operational, but I don't think it's anything that can't be fixed. So I acquired the table from him and also had the great opportunity to meet his son, Levi, who is a big fan of YouTube Kids. So he may not see this video. I'm sure Jordan will share it with him, but wanted to say hi to him and thanks for the support in helping me get this loaded. So when I get this all set up and fixed again, I will do a full review of it down the road. In the meantime, I wanted to thank you guys for tuning in. And if you don't want to miss the next video, hit subscribe. And if you don't want to miss the notification, hit that bell. We'll see you next time.